My son called me from nowhere and sneered, "I'm getting married tomorrow, Mom. Your car and your house, already sold. Bye." I was lying in a hospital bed, my chest stitched with pain, yet his words hurt more than any needle. For decades I carried him alone, sacrificing sleep, selling my jewelry, burying my own dreams so he could rise. And now I was discarded like a broken chair. But here's the truth he didn't know. What he thought he stole was never his. This isn't a story of revenge. It's a story of a quiet fire that cannot be erased. When my son's cruel words rang in my ear, "Your car and house are sold. Bye," I couldn't help but think back to the beginning, to all the years that carved me into who I am. My name is Evelyn Carter. I am 63 years old, and once, long ago, I dreamed of writing books for children. Not textbooks, not lesson plans, but stories filled with magic, talking owls and secret gardens. But dreams have a way of dissolving when tragedy strikes. I was 28 when my husband, Michael, collapsed on a construction site and never came home again. Daniel was only 5. He had his father's eyes, big and curious, and when he stared up at me at the funeral, I knew in that instant that every plan I had for myself had been erased. I traded the dream of becoming an author for the certainty of a paycheck. I stepped into a small classroom, chalk in hand, and began teaching second graders the way I once planned to teach the world through my stories. Those early years were a blur of sleepless nights, double shifts, and quiet tears in the bathroom so Daniel wouldn't see me fall apart. There were times when rent was due, the refrigerator was nearly empty, and the electricity bill sat unopened on the table. I pawned my mother's silver bracelet, the one piece of jewelry that had survived 3 generations, to keep the lights on one winter. I told myself it was just a trinket. In truth, it felt like selling a piece of my history. Daniel never knew. I shielded him from all of it. He had piano lessons when we could barely afford groceries. He wore clean, pressed clothes while I patched my own sweaters with thread from a dollar store. I remember the Christmas I skipped dinner so he could wake to find a bicycle under the tree. My body ached with hunger that night, but his laughter the next morning filled me more than any meal could. People asked why I never remarried. They would whisper when I left church alone, their eyes soft with pity. Truth was, I had the chance. A kind man named Robert came into my life when Daniel was 12. He loved books like I did, and he once told me he wanted to help me publish my stories. But Daniel, jealous and fragile, told me he would run away if I ever let another man into our home. He cried so hard that night, his little fists pounding my lap, begging me not to replace his father. And so I let Robert go. I folded my heart into silence, believing I was doing what any good mother would do, choosing her child above all else. I sold the small patch of land my parents left me just to cover Daniel's tuition when he was accepted into college. I stood in the lawyer's office signing away my inheritance, reminding myself that education was the best gift I could ever give. Later, I sold my wedding ring to cover the down payment on his first car. It was a modest sedan, second-hand, but to him, it was freedom. To me, it was another piece of Michael I had let go. Still, I never doubted. I believed every sacrifice carved a stronger bond between us. I believed that one day when he was grown, he would look back and say, "Mom, you saved me. You gave me everything." That faith was the fuel that kept me standing when my body begged me to collapse. Teaching was never easy, but I made it work. I graded papers at midnight, ironed Daniel's shirts before dawn, and stood in front of my students every morning with a smile pasted over my exhaustion. My colleagues admired my dedication. Some even envied the way Daniel excelled. Good grades, captain of the debate team, scholarships knocking on his door. They didn't know the cost. They didn't know that every step forward he took was balanced on the bones of my sacrifices. I used to tell myself that when I grew old, Daniel would take care of me. That was the reward, wasn't it? A son who would sit by my bed, who would say thank you not in words but in love. That was how it was supposed to be. I remember one spring afternoon, long after he had left for college, when the house felt unbearably empty. I pulled out the box where I kept my unfinished manuscripts, stories I once thought I'd publish. I held them in my hands, the paper yellowing, the ink fading. I whispered to myself, someday when Daniel is settled, I will return to this. Someday it will be my turn. I placed the box back under the bed, convinced that time was on my side. But time is a trickster. It doesn't always give back what it takes. And love, well, love can twist into something unrecognizable if left unchecked. I told myself the sacrifices would be worth it, that Daniel's success was proof enough that I had lived well. I ignored the gnawing voice inside me that asked, "What about you, Evelyn? Who takes care of you?" For decades, I silenced that voice. I silenced it when I walked alone to parent-teacher conferences. I silenced it when I ate reheated soup while Daniel dined at banquets. I silenced it when I slipped into bed alone, clutching an empty pillow where companionship should have been. I thought silence was strength. I thought sacrifice was love. But silence becomes a prison when no one listens, and sacrifice becomes a curse when it is never acknowledged. And yet even now, a part of me still clings to that belief that Daniel will remember, that all I gave will not vanish like smoke in the wind. But what I did not know, what I could never have imagined, was that the very choice I once made to give up my own happiness, to refuse a second chance at love for the sake of my son, would one day open the door to a betrayal more vicious than anything I had endured. The phone rang against the sterile silence of my hospital room. My chest was still tender from the surgery, wires trailing like vines across my body, monitors beeping in a rhythm that felt louder than my heartbeat. When I saw Daniel's name flash on the screen, a smile tugged at my lips. At last, I thought, he's calling to check on me. "Mom." His voice came sharp, hurried as though I were interrupting something far more important. "Just wanted to let you know. I'm getting married tomorrow." For a moment, my breath caught. But before I could gather words of congratulations, he continued with the kind of casual cruelty that only comes from practice. "Your car and your house? Already sold. Bye." Click. The call ended before I could even reply. I stared at the ceiling tiles, the antiseptic smell of the room pressing down on me until the air felt too thick to swallow. Married tomorrow? Car and house gone? My hand trembled as I placed the phone back on the tray table. No invitation, no explanation, not even a pause to ask if I was alive enough to care, just a notification the way one might cancel a subscription. I lay there, replaying his words. Every syllable dug into me like glass shards. My car, the one I bought after selling my wedding ring, my house, the place Michael and I had built into a sanctuary, the place where Daniel took his first steps, gone. When the nurse came in to check my vitals, I forced a smile. She adjusted the IV line, oblivious to the fact that my entire world had just been reduced to rubble in less than 30 seconds. That night, I didn't sleep. My chest ached, not from the wound, but from the weight of betrayal. I thought of the years of sacrifice, of Robert walking away because I chose my son. I thought of the box of manuscripts hidden under the bed, waiting for a future that no longer existed. Every choice, every trade, every silent surrender, all leading here, to this. The following morning, a man in a gray suit appeared at my hospital room. He introduced himself as an associate from a law firm downtown. He carried a folder thick with documents, his voice polished, almost kind. "Your son asked us to bring this to you, Mrs. Carter. Just some routine authorizations. Power of attorney, health directives. It'll ensure everything is taken care of." My heart clenched. Power of attorney, health directives, words that stripped me of autonomy, words that would make Daniel the keeper of my life. My hands shook as I flipped through the papers. Paragraph after paragraph signed away control of my bank accounts, of my medical decisions, of the very roof over my head. I looked up at the man. And what if I don't sign? His smile faltered just slightly. Your son said it's best for everyone if you do. He left the folder on the table and walked out, leaving the room colder than before. I pressed my palm against the documents, feeling the sharp corners dig into my skin. 1,000 questions stormed my mind. Had he been planning this all along? Was every sacrifice I made just kindling for his ambition? I thought about calling the police, about screaming into the phone until someone understood the crime being committed. But then I imagined the headlines, a frail old woman accusing her successful son. I could already hear the whispers. She's exaggerating. She's confused. She's just bitter. So I did nothing, at least not yet. I tucked the folder into the drawer beside my bed. When the nurse asked if everything was all right, I smiled and said, just routine paperwork. That evening, I held my phone in my hands and typed Daniel's number. My finger hovered over the call button. What would I say? Don't steal from me? Remember what I gave you? My throat tightened, because deep down, I already knew his answer. He would deny, minimize, or worse, laugh. Instead, I whispered into the stillness of the room, why Daniel? Why do this to me? The only reply was the steady beep of the heart monitor. I closed my eyes and saw Michael's face, the way he looked at me the day Daniel was born. He had whispered, he's our future. But the boy who once clung to my skirt when thunderstorms shook the house was now a man willing to erase me from my own life. If you're listening to this story, if you've ever given everything only to be treated as disposable, let me ask you, what would you do in my place? Call the police? Beg? Or sit in silence, waiting for a chance to reclaim your dignity? I lay back, staring at the ceiling once more. A storm brewed beneath my ribs, but my face remained calm. Daniel thought I was weak, a woman too fragile to resist. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that I had already survived worse. And I wasn't finished yet. The day they wheeled me out of the hospital, the sun was too bright. It cut through the clouds like a knife, and for a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, light meant something good. But when the cab pulled into the street where my house stood, the light felt cruel, like a spotlight revealing everything I didn't want to see. The front porch was bare. The rocking chair where I used to sit with Michael on summer nights was gone. The flower boxes I once tended with Daniel when he was a boy were ripped out, soil scattered across the wooden steps. My heart pounded as the driver helped me up the walk. I opened the door, and the silence that met me was not the silence of home. It was the silence of vacancy. Every wall was stripped. The photographs, our wedding day, Daniel's first day of school, Michael grinning beside the barbecue, gone. Furniture vanished, closets gutted, shelves wiped clean. The box of manuscripts I'd kept under the bed, my secret hope of becoming a writer again, nowhere to be found. I stood in the doorway with my hospital wristband still clinging to my skin and realized I no longer existed in this house. Daniel had erased me. For a long time, I wandered from room to room, my footsteps echoing like I was trespassing in a stranger's home. In the kitchen, the cabinet doors hung open, bare as bones. In the living room, the carpet still carried the faint indentations where our sofa had once sat. My bedroom smelled of dust and absence. I lowered myself onto the floor, my body trembling with exhaustion. And for the first time since Michael died, I let myself cry without holding back, not quiet tears, but deep, shaking sobs that pulled years of silence from my chest. The house absorbed them without answer. That night, I couldn't bear to stay. I booked a small apartment downtown, a one-room place above a laundromat where the machines rattled until midnight. The air smelled of detergent and loneliness. I unpacked what little I had, 2 dresses, a coat, a stack of unpaid bills, and sat on the edge of the narrow bed. For hours, I listened to the hum of dryers downstairs, feeling like I had been folded and pressed into something smaller than myself. Days turned into weeks, no calls from Daniel, no invitation to the wedding, no curious neighbors asking where I had gone. It was as if I had been scrubbed from the world. Each night I cried softly into my pillow, muffling the sound so the walls wouldn't echo back my shame. I told myself I wasn't mourning the objects. Chairs, photos, manuscripts. I was mourning proof that I had ever mattered. One evening, as I fumbled with groceries at my apartment door, a knock startled me. An older man stood there, his cap pulled low over his forehead. I recognized him instantly. Mr. Thompson, the neighbor who had lived across the street from me and Michael for 30 years. His wife used to bring over casseroles when Daniel was young. "I found something," he said, holding out a worn envelope. "Your husband asked me to keep this safe a long time ago, said I'd know when to give it back." My breath caught as I took the envelope, its edges yellowed with time. I closed the door behind me, my hands trembling. Sitting on the bed, I tore it open carefully, like it might crumble. Inside was a single sheet of paper in Michael's familiar handwriting. His words were steady, firm. "Evelyn, if they ever make you feel small, if they ever deny what you've built, remember this: the house is protected. I had it placed under legal trust before I passed. No one can take it from you, not without your consent. This home is yours until your last breath. No one, not even Daniel, can erase that." I pressed the letter to my chest, the tears coming fresh. But these were not tears of despair. They were tears of recognition. All this time, I thought Daniel had stripped me bare, but Michael's foresight had kept a piece of me safe. My house was not lost. My history was not erased. The relief that washed through me was almost unbearable. But beneath it lurked something darker. If Daniel knew the house was still legally mine, why go through such theatrics? Why clear out the belongings? Why sell the car? Why shove me into invisibility? As I folded the letter back into its envelope, my hands shook, not just from weakness, but from fear, because I realized that the betrayal I thought had ended was only the beginning. Evelyn clutched the letter, her pulse thundering. She did not know, could not know that this piece of paper was about to pull her into a deeper storm, one where love and greed would tangle so tightly that escape would feel impossible. The letter from Michael sat on my lap all night, its edges worn soft from the way I kept folding and unfolding it. I read his words again and again, clinging to each line as though they were ropes pulling me out of a pit. The house was safe, legally mine. Daniel hadn't stolen everything, not yet. That knowledge steadied me, but it also raised a question that made my blood run cold. If he hadn't truly sold the house, what exactly had he done? The next morning, I dressed carefully in the plainest clothes I had and took the bus downtown. The law office, where Michael's old friend, Mr. Harper, still practiced, had an oak door and a brass plaque that seemed almost too heavy to push open. Inside, the secretary led me to a waiting room, and within minutes I was facing a man with silver hair and kind eyes, who rose to greet me as if I hadn't aged a day since he last saw me. "Evelyn," he said, his voice lined with surprise and sadness. "It's been years." I slid Michael's letter across his desk. "He wrote this before he died. Can you tell me if it's true?" Mr. Harper put on his glasses, studied the handwriting, then opened a file drawer with surprising speed. He pulled out a thin folder, flipped through documents, and finally set one in front of me. "Your husband was a cautious man. He did exactly as he promised. The deed to your home was placed in a living trust under your name only. It cannot be sold without your direct consent." The words hit me like water after a drought. Relief swelled in my chest, but it was short-lived. Mr. Harper's brow furrowed as he pulled out another file. "However, Evelyn, I need you to see this. Your son. He's been filing petitions. He's claiming you're unfit to manage your own affairs. He's requesting guardianship over your finances and medical decisions." I stared at him, my mouth dry. "Guardianship, but I'm not. It's called conservatorship," he explained gently. "If the court approves it, he would control your accounts, your property, even your health care. He could decide where you live, who you see, what you spend. In short, you'd lose your independence. I shook my head slowly, as if denial could erase the words. He thinks I'm incapable? Mr. Harper sighed. He's presenting your recent hospital stay as evidence. He's painting a picture of a fragile, elderly woman unable to make sound choices. If he succeeds, the trust Michael set up won't matter. Daniel would decide everything. The office spun around me. Just when I thought I had clawed my way back to solid ground, I saw the earth crumbling beneath me again. My own son wanted not just my house, but my life. My voice, my rights, my very existence, reduced to signatures he would forge on my behalf. I gripped the arms of the chair, trying to steady myself. My mind flashed through the years, the bicycle I bought with skipped meals, the land I sold for his tuition, the ring I pawned for his car. Each sacrifice replayed like a cruel joke, and now he wanted to declare me incompetent, as if love had emptied me so much that nothing was left. "Is there anything I can do?" I whispered. Mr. Harper leaned forward. "Yes, we can contest it. We'll need medical records, proof of your capacity, perhaps even testimony. It won't be easy, but you're far from helpless." I left the office with a folder clutched to my chest, but what I carried weighed far more than paper. It was the truth. My son was preparing to erase me, not just from a house, but from myself. That night, in my cramped apartment above the laundromat, I sat by the window listening to the hum of machines below. I imagined Daniel standing in court, speaking of me as if I were already gone. Too weak to object. The thought nearly broke me. But then I remembered Michael's words. "This home is yours until your last breath." He had trusted me to fight for myself, to guard what we built. For years, I believed my worth depended on Daniel's recognition, on hearing him say, "Thank you." But now I saw the truth. My value was not in his hands. It never had been. If you're hearing my story, let me ask you, have you ever trusted someone so deeply that you didn't notice when they turned your love into leverage? Would you keep silent or would you rise, even if your voice shakes? I folded the documents neatly, placed them beside Michael's letter, and whispered into the quiet, "You won't take me, Daniel. Not my house. Not my life." The laundromat machines drummed below, steady as a heartbeat. I knew then that my silence was over, but I didn't yet know that Daniel's betrayal had only begun to show its teeth, and what lay ahead would demand more than quiet resolve. It would demand a kind of courage I had never needed before. I didn't storm into court. I didn't scream at Daniel or beg him to stop. Instead, I chose a quieter path. One morning, with Michael's letter tucked safely in my purse, I walked past the hospital where I had once been just another fragile patient. Across the street sat a small, dusty storefront with a faded sign that read, "For lease." The windows were streaked with grime, and the floor inside was littered with scraps of old paper. Yet when I stepped inside, I could already see it differently. Rows of daisies by the window, roses in buckets, lavender hanging upside down from the rafters. A place not of endings, but of beginnings. It took nearly all of my savings, but I signed the lease. I scrubbed the floors until my knees ached, painted the walls a pale yellow, and filled the shop with fresh flowers. The scent of soil and blossoms wrapped around me like an embrace. I named it Second Bloom. At first, customers trickled in slowly. Nurses from the hospital, families visiting patients, the occasional passerby. They would buy a bouquet and linger to talk, perhaps sensing that my shop was more than just flowers. They shared their stories, grief, hope, small victories. I listened, arranging petals and stems, and realized I had created not just a business, but a sanctuary. One afternoon, a woman about my age came in, her shoulders stooped, her eyes swollen from crying. She bought a single lily and confessed, almost in a whisper, that her daughter had stopped speaking to her after taking the family home. "I feel invisible," she said. I handed her the flower and told her softly, "You are not invisible here." Word spread. Soon more women arrived. Some had been cast aside by their children, others by husbands, families, or simply by age. They came not only for flowers, but for a table in the back where I served tea in chipped cups. We sat together, telling our stories, weaving pain into something softer. I became known, quietly, as the Flower Mother. The name began as a joke from one of the nurses who brought her elderly aunt, but it stuck. Strangers began to use it with warmth in their voices, and for the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as a burden, not as a ghost of sacrifice, but as a woman with value in her own right. The shop grew into a rhythm. Mornings were filled with deliveries, afternoons with visitors, evenings with laughter around the tea table. There were still nights I lay awake wondering what Daniel was doing, whether he thought of me at all. But here, surrounded by blossoms and women whose stories mirrored mine, I found a gentler kind of peace. Then came the day that shattered the stillness. It was a Saturday, the shop humming with voices, petals scattered across the counter. I was trimming sunflowers when the doorbell chimed. I looked up and froze. Daniel walked in hand with his new wife, scanning the room like any customer. He didn't see me at first. My hair, pulled back in a bun, had grown streaks of silver. My apron was smeared with soil. To him, I must have looked like any shopkeeper. "Look at this place," his wife said, delighted. "It smells heavenly." Daniel nodded absently, glancing at the rows of roses. He drifted toward the back, his eyes landing on the table where women sat with teacups, laughing gently. One of them waved at me and called out, "Flower Mother, can we have more biscuits?" The words hung in the air. Daniel's body stiffened. Slowly, he turned toward me. His gaze met mine, and for the first time, I saw confusion crack the mask of certainty he always wore. His lips parted, but no sound came. I dried my hands on my apron and met his eyes, calm as still water. He opened his mouth again as if to speak, but nothing formed. Around us, the chatter continued, the scent of blossoms heavy and sweet. I smiled, not cruelly, not warmly, just enough to let him know I was not broken, not erased. His eyes widened, a flicker of recognition mingling with disbelief, and in that moment, I knew the real reckoning had not yet come. Daniel stood frozen in the middle of the shop, his hand slipping from his wife's. Around us, the world continued without pause. Flowers being wrapped, teacups clinking, soft laughter rising from the back table. Yet between us, silence stretched sharp and heavy. His eyes roamed over the space, from the shelves of blossoms to the circle of women who looked to me as though I were more than just a florist. He was trying to place me, to reconcile the mother he thought he had discarded with the woman standing calmly before him. Finally, he whispered, "Mom." The word sounded strange, like a language he hadn't spoken in years. My heart jolted, but I steadied myself. I wiped my hands again on the apron and gave a small nod. His wife looked between us, confused. "This is... your mother?" she asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't answer her. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice. I thought... His words faltered. "I thought you had nothing left." I let the silence answer him. He glanced around again, this time truly seeing the bustling shop, the women sipping tea, the nurses dropping by to buy flowers for their patients. This was not the life of someone erased. This was not the nothing he had hoped to leave behind. His eyes filled with something I hadn't seen since he was a child. Fear. Not fear of me, but fear of what he had lost. "Mom," he said again, more urgent this time. "I made mistakes. I shouldn't have..." He stopped, searching my face. "Can we talk? Please?" For a fleeting second, my heart wanted to leap, to believe that perhaps the boy I once held was reaching for me again. But then I remembered the hospital call, the stripped house, The documents meant to declare me incompetent. I remembered the nights I cried alone in a rented room, erased from his world. I looked him in the eye and spoke with a steadiness I didn't know I possessed. The Daniel I knew died on the day of his wedding. I only have myself now. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water, rippling outward. His face crumpled, the color draining. He opened his mouth to argue, to plead, but I turned back to my flowers. My hands moved with care, arranging stems into a bouquet as though he were no more than another customer. His wife tugged at his arm, whispering something I didn't catch. He lingered, torn between pride and desperation, but in the end, he left. The bell over the door chimed as it closed behind him, and just like that, the storm passed. I didn't cry, I didn't collapse. I simply exhaled, long and quiet, as though releasing decades of weight. Later that afternoon, when the rush slowed, I sat at the back table surrounded by the women who had become my companions. Mrs. Hayes, whose daughter hadn't spoken to her in 3 years, poured me tea. Maria, abandoned by both sons after a property dispute, pressed a biscuit into my hand. We shared stories again, but now their eyes held something new when they looked at me. Not pity, not sorrow, but respect. I leaned back, watching sunlight pour through the window, catching the petals of daisies and roses in a golden glow. A soft smile spread across my face. It wasn't triumph in the way people imagine, no victory speech, no courtroom drama, no reunion hug. It was quieter, deeper. I realized then that I no longer longed for Daniel's approval. I didn't need him to see me, to thank me, to carry me into his future. I had built a new life with my own hands, fragile but real, rooted like the flowers in their pots. And in this circle of women, each carrying their own scars, I was not invisible. If you've ever been denied, if your sacrifices have been swallowed by silence, know this: you are not erased. You are not disposable. Like me, you can rise, not with vengeance, not with fury, but with quiet strength that no one can take away. The shop grew quieter as evening fell. I sat in the center of it, tea warm in my palms, laughter soft around me, and for the first time in decades, peace settled in my chest. The world outside might never know what had been taken from me or what I had rebuilt, but I knew, and that was enough. So if you're listening now and this story is brushed against your own wounds, leave a mark, even just a single dot, so I'll know I'm not alone, because Evelyn Carter is not alone, and neither are you.